My name is Vivian, and I am 27 years old. My life seems to be carved from the marble of family expectations and a flawless facade of well-being. I hold the position of senior manager at my parents' company, which sounds far more impressive than it is in reality. It is their empire, their brainchild, which my mother Monica and father Robert built from the foundation of absolute zero, investing years of sleepless nights and drops of sweat into every brick. I entered this well-oiled machine right after college, like a pre-made part obligated to fit perfectly into its designated place. The logical continuation of this impeccable biography was supposed to be marriage. I was engaged to Brandon Harris. Our relationship, which lasted about a year, initially seemed like a page from a novel about a beautiful stranger. He was the epitome of politeness and attentiveness. His hand always anticipated the creak of a door hinge. His questions about my day were not a formality, but a genuine interest, and his memory held the smallest details of my stories, which he would present to me like precious jewels. During that period, I was deeply convinced that I was experiencing that one singular feeling: love. However, behind his individual radiance stretched a different reality, the reality of his family, who lived in a small town in West Virginia, a world without an abundance of money, where the father worked at a factory and the mother didn't work at all. Upon my first meeting with them, I was met with blatant, almost aggressive rudeness. They interrupted others, their inappropriate jokes grated on the ears, and their demeanor left a persistent feeling that they were granting me the greatest favor by allowing me to be near their son. Blinded by my belief that Brandon was different, a product of a different environment, I diligently ignored these warning signs, drowning them out with the whisper of my own heart. My parents viewed this union with open skepticism from the very beginning. My father, Robert, investing all his paternal wisdom into every question, asked if I was truly so sure about Brandon. My mother, Monica, gently but persistently advised me not to rush, to give myself time to get to know him better. But I, armed with youthful maximalism, fiercely fought back. I wasn't just defending my choice. I was fighting for my happiness, as I perceived it then, and in the end, I managed to convince them to give their consent to the marriage. We set a wedding date just 4 months away. Wanting to provide us with a worthy start to our family life, my parents gave me a truly royal gift, a magnificent house in a prestigious Denver suburb. It wasn't just a house, but the embodiment of a dream, a spacious, detached building with a manicured yard, 3 bedrooms, and 2 bathrooms. My father personally oversaw the complete renovation for several months, investing tens of thousands of dollars into the endeavor. New hardwood floors, a gleaming modern kitchen, every detail was perfected. It was the flawless place for Brandon and me to begin our life together. On the day the last worker left the threshold, my parents and I, filled with joyful anticipation, went to see the final result. I was trembling with excitement, imagining how I would fill these walls with my happiness. However, as we approached the house, the idyllic picture was shattered. Brandon's car was in our driveway, alongside 2 other cars I recognized with an unpleasant sinking feeling as belonging to his parents. Approaching the front door, we heard loud, irritated exclamations coming from inside. "These neighbors are too close. It's just unbearable." It was the voice of Mrs. Harris, Brandon's mother. Her voice was loud, sharp, and assertive. "We need to build this fence. I don't like people looking at us." My parents and I exchanged silent glances, and in that silence was a shared bewilderment and growing anxiety. Crossing the threshold, we found Brandon, his mother, and his father inside. They were pacing through the house as if they had been its rightful owners for many years. Not one of them acknowledged us with even a nod or a word of greeting. They pretended not to notice our presence. Mrs. Harris was settled in the master bedroom, sprawled on the gleaming white new bed, without having taken off her street shoes. Ugly stains of street dirt were already appearing on the snow-white comforter. Mr. Harris stood by the window and, without any embarrassment, was smoking a cigarette. Right before our eyes, he contentedly stubbed out the cigarette butt on the polished surface of the wooden nightstand, leaving an ugly, dark, charred scar on the perfect wood grain. "What are you doing?" escaped my lips. My voice sounded thinner and higher than I would have liked, betraying the depth of my shock and offense. Mrs. Harris reluctantly propped herself up. "Oh, Vivian, we were just looking at the house," came her excuse, devoid of even a hint of embarrassment. "Without asking me," I retorted, feeling the heat of indignation spreading through my body. Mr. Harris slowly turned around. "This will be our son's house. We have every right to see it," he declared with deliberate gruffness. "Actually," my father interjected, his usually calm voice tense as a taut string, "this house is a gift to my daughter." Mrs. Harris just waved her hand dismissively, as if swatting away a bothersome fly. "Well, she's marrying Brandon, so it's his house too." Then she sprawled back on the bed, as if staking her claim to the territory. "We'll take this bedroom. It's the largest one." "That is not happening," my voice sounded cold and sharp, like a shard of ice breaking off. All my previous blind confidence collapsed in an instant, revealing the bare, ugly truth. Mr. Harris, as if not deigning to acknowledge my protest, walked past me into the hallway with the air of a full-fledged owner. He swung open the door to the guest room, gave it a quick, appraising glance, and proclaimed, "This one will be perfect for Mason." "Who is Mason?" my mother asked, her voice reflecting the same growing bewilderment and horror that was gripping me. "Our grandson," Mr. Harris blurted out, as if stating something obvious. "Brandon's nephew. Brandon, call your brother Jacob right now. Tell him to break his lease and move here with Ashley and the kid." Brandon, his face stony and expressionless, silently took his phone out of his pocket. That simple, automatic gesture was more terrifying than any scream. He was a soldier, blindly following an order. "Wait," I exhaled, feeling the ground disappear from under my feet. "What are you even talking about?" Mr. Harris turned to me, and his eyes showed the irritation of a patient adult listening to the whims of an unreasonable child. "Jacob and his wife need a stable place to live. Mason will be starting school soon. This house will be perfect for them." "This is my house," I whispered, but my voice was weak and lost in this spacious room that still smelled of fresh paint. "I said it will be in Jacob's name," he continued, as if I hadn't spoken a word, "for Mason's future. You and Brandon can come back here later, when you have children. For now, you two can rent an apartment somewhere." I felt as if I had been punched in the solar plexus, all the air knocked out of my chest. "This house was a gift from my parents," I exclaimed, and my voice was already trembling with tears. "It's not a boarding house for your entire family." Mr. Harris's face instantly turned crimson, flushed with angry blood. "The house belongs to my son, which means it belongs to us. You need to learn to respect your future father-in-law." Mrs. Harris, still reclining on the bed, propped herself up on her elbow again. "And as our future daughter-in-law, you should care for our needs. You should hire a maid to keep everything clean for us when we move in." My mother, who had been silently observing this nightmarish scene until then, stepped forward decisively. Her posture, always impeccable, straightened even more. "If you need a house and someone to take care of you, you should pay for it yourselves." Mrs. Harris's jaw dropped in silent, theatrical offense. "How dare you treat us like beggars? We are family." "Don't you talk to my mother like that," I said sharply. And at that moment, Brandon tightly grabbed my wrist. His fingers dug into my skin with such force that the pain shot to the bone. "Vivian, apologize to my parents," he growled through his teeth. I tried to pull my hand away, but his grip only tightened, becoming iron-like, almost bestial. Mr. Harris pointed a contemptuous finger at my parents. "This is what happens when you raise your daughter wrong. Don't worry, Brandon will teach her how to behave after the wedding." He looked at his son and nodded significantly, uttering words that hung in the air like an icy verdict. "A woman sometimes needs to be hit. That's the only way she'll learn to be obedient." And Brandon, my polite, attentive Brandon, nodded in response. A chill ran through me, as if all my insides had suddenly turned into a block of ice. I finally managed to wrench my hand free with such fury that he let go for a moment. "I said you didn't contribute a single cent to our wedding," I shouted, my voice shaking with rage and humiliation. You don't have a house. You don't have a car. And now you're acting like this house is yours." Mr. Harris laughed, a laugh that sounded like the grating of iron. "You threw yourself at Brandon. You're not young anymore, Vivian. If you were worth anything, your parents wouldn't have to bribe a man to marry you by giving him a house and gifts." "That's it," I whispered, turning to my parents, and they read the final, irrevocable decision in my eyes. I will not marry him. Then I looked straight at Brandon into his empty, alien eyes. "We are from different worlds. This would never have worked. Take your parents and get out of my house." Mrs. Harris got off the bed with the air of an offended queen. "If you call off this wedding, my son will never take you back." "Fine," I said with an icy calm that had replaced the storm. Mr. Harris stepped close to me, his tobacco-tainted breath burning my face. "You're pathetic. You're an ugly girl no man wants. You'll end up alone." Before I could find the words to respond to this vileness, something swift and dark flashed in my peripheral vision. It was my father's fist. With all the strength possessed by this always restrained and calm man, he punched Mr. Harris in the face. In the silence of the room, the sound of the impact was deafeningly loud, like a gunshot. Mr. Harris, without making a sound, flew backward and crashed heavily onto the newly laid parquet floor. Mrs. Harris shrieked piercingly, "He's beating my husband!" "Say one more word," my father's voice sounded, low, ringing with restrained fury, and there was something in his tone that sent a chill down the spine. "And you won't leave this house on your own 2 feet." The air in the spacious living room thickened, became viscous and heavy, as if before a thunderstorm. Before anyone could move, my father, always so restrained and diplomatic, sharply turned to Brandon and with a short swing, struck him across the face. The sound wasn't as loud as with his father, but more muffled and therefore no less eerie. "That's for letting them insult my daughter," he pronounced, and each word fell like a hammer on an anvil. Then, without wasting a second, he bent down, grabbed the recovering Mr. Harris by the collar of his shirt, and with a strength unexpected for his age, jerked him up from the floor. "Know this," my father said quietly, but every syllable was clear. "Even if Vivian had wanted to marry into your family, I would never have allowed it. My daughter is smart, beautiful, and capable. She is too good for your son." With these words, he forcefully shoved Mr. Harris towards the front door. The latter, staggering, scrambled to his feet and, without looking back at his wife and son, ran out of the house with a sound resembling an animal growl, like a hunted beast. Mrs. Harris, emitting muffled sobs, frantically grabbed Brandon's arm and dragged him towards the exit. On the threshold, she turned around, and her tear-stained face was contorted by a grimace of pure hatred. "You will regret this," she shouted, her voice breaking into a shriek. "You'll all pay for this." When the door slammed shut, finally dispelling the nightmarish mirage, I felt my legs give way. A muffled, choked sob escaped my chest. "You were right about him," I said, addressing my parents, tears streaming down my face, washing away the remnants of naive belief. "You were both right." My mother silently came over and hugged me, her embrace strong and reliable, like a rock. "It's all right, dear," she whispered. "It ended the way it was supposed to end." Several weeks passed after I broke off the engagement. I threw myself into work, trying to fill every minute of the day with routine tasks, just so there wouldn't be a second for thoughts about Brandon and his terrible family. I naively believed that this disgusting episode was finally over. Then one morning, I received a letter from Brandon, a regular email with a harmless subject line. Opening it, I saw an attached spreadsheet. It was an extremely detailed, penny-precise list of all the expenses he had supposedly paid for during the entire year of our relationship. My eyes scanned the lines, and each one evoked a bitter smirk of disbelief. Starbucks coffee, March 15, $14.50. Valentine's Day flowers, $35. Uber ride, April 3rd, $18. Dinner at Italian restaurant, May 20, $67. It went on and on, filling several screens. The total sum, calculated with pedantic accuracy, was $3,247.82. The text of the email, in a dry, businesslike tone, stated, "You owe me this money. Pay me by next Friday, or I will come to your office." I stared at the screen in disbelief, rereading these insane lines over and over. It couldn't be, but it was true. And it was complete, absolute madness. The truth was that during our relationship, I had paid for almost everything. Every restaurant dinner, every movie ticket, every trip. I paid for Brandon's birthday. I bought him the latest iPhone, which cost me $1,400. In return, he gave me a $150 Target gift card. When his father had health problems and needed expensive treatment, it was I who paid for it, shelling out $1,800. And now this man was sending me a bill for coffee and Uber rides. I had no intention of paying him a single cent. A week later, while I was at work in my office, my assistant knocked on the door. Her usually calm face showed unconcealed worry. "Vivian, there are some people here to see you. They have a poster." "A poster," I repeated. But before she could answer, the door swung open, and Brandon, his mother, and his father barged into my office, roughly pushing her aside. Mr. Harris was carrying a huge homemade poster. On it, in screaming large letters, was written, "Vivian owes Brandon $3,247.82, followed by that same humiliating list of all the expenses. Mrs. Harris, without wasting a second, began shouting, addressing the employees gathered in the hallway. "This woman dated my son for a whole year. She spent all his money, and now she won't pay him back." People from neighboring offices started coming out to see what the noise was about. A curious crowd gathered at the door. Mr. Harris, triumphantly holding the poster above his head, began reading its contents with the pathos of a prosecutor. "Coffee, $14.50. Flowers, $35. Uber ride." Someone in the crowd couldn't hold back and laughed. Then someone else. The air filled with an embarrassed and simultaneously mocking buzz. Soon, the restrained laughter turned into open, loud guffaws that rolled through the office corridors, echoing off the glass walls. "He's charging her for coffee," came a voice, full of incredulous amusement. I heard someone say, 82 cents, countered another voice. "He included 82 cents in the bill. How petty." Mrs. Harris's face, already crimson with rage, turned a deep purplish red, like an overripe fruit about to burst. "Stop laughing," she shrieked, vainly trying to shout over the growing noise. "This is serious. She owes my son money." Rising from my chair with a calm, icy dignity that must have contrasted sharply with the storm raging inside me, I walked over to my dark, polished wood desk. Without a word, I opened my leather checkbook, wrote out the sum in a sweeping, confident hand, and with a characteristic silky rustle, tore out the check. I approached Brandon, who was standing there clutching his ridiculous poster, and measured him with a look full of contempt. Then I threw the check in his face, and that paper square, floating in the air like a parachute, seemed a symbol of final settlement. "Here is your money," my voice sounded, pure and cutting like a blade. "Now give me back what you owe me." Brandon looked utterly confused. His confidence instantly evaporated under the hail of ridicule. "What?" was all he could exhale. "The iPhone I bought you for $1,400. The medical bills I paid for your father, $1,800. That's $3,200 confirmed by receipts. Give it back to me." Brandon helplessly opened his mouth and closed it again, like a fish out of water. He didn't utter a word, and his eyes showed only confusion and pathetic helplessness. Mrs. Harris, seeing her son's humiliation, let out a low growl and lunged at me. But her impulsive rush was abruptly interrupted. My mother, appearing as if from nowhere, I hadn't even known she was in the building, stood between us with unexpected strength, like a living shield. "Security!" Her voice, usually soft, sounded metallic and authoritative. "Remove these 3 from the office immediately." Almost instantly, 2 security guards arrived, their imposing figures immediately restoring order. They decisively grabbed Mr. Harris, who was still mindlessly clutching his poster, and Brandon by their arms. Mrs. Harris continued to shriek piercingly, her screams mixing with muttered protests as they were escorted towards the elevators. The crowd of employees who had witnessed this humiliating scene burst into applause, seeing off the uninvited guests. But alas, that was by no means the end. Brandon didn't stop. His resentment seemed to have found a new, disgusting outlet in the digital space. He began creating fake social media accounts, proliferating them with manic persistence, and publishing outright slander. He took my old, carefree photos from profiles and, using primitive editing, presented them in a humiliating and defamatory light. He posted sentimental videos with lengthy captions in which he portrayed himself as the victim and me as a heartless, calculating bitch who had broken his heart. Every day, my inbox was flooded with his emails, long, rambling messages full of manipulation and hidden threats about how he didn't know what he would do to himself if I didn't come back, about how I had ruined his life, and how he couldn't live without me. My parents, seeing how this campaign of harassment was draining me, finally decided to put an end to it. They hired a brilliant but tough lawyer specializing in family and personal matters, who immediately filed an official complaint for harassment and easily obtained a temporary restraining order. According to this document, Brandon was prohibited not only from contacting me in any way, but also from coming within 100 feet of me. And after that, as if by magic, a long-awaited, deafening silence fell. I was finally able to truly focus on my work. I immersed myself in new projects, stayed late at the office, greedily devoured industry reports, became an active participant in meetings and conferences, finding healing in professional fulfillment. Several months later, I had the honor of speaking at a major regional business conference representing our family company. My presentation, dedicated to current market trends and business development strategies, was met with lively interest. When I finished, a small group of executives and potential investors immediately approached me, asking questions and sharing their thoughts. In that moment, I felt incredible pride, not only for myself, but for the cause I served. During the online lunch organized after the conference, fate brought me together with Daniel Mitchell. It turned out he was one of the co-founders of a large and very successful technology company. A Stanford graduate, he came from a well-known family of entrepreneurs from Seattle, and his manners had that innate confidence that has nothing to do with bravado. Daniel was different from Brandon in every conceivable and inconceivable way. He spoke slowly and thoughtfully, carefully choosing his words. But perhaps even more importantly, he knew how to listen, sincerely paying attention to the speaker's words without trying to interrupt or monopolize the conversation. After the conference ended, I received from him not an email, but a real, live letter, handwritten on thick, quality paper. He thanked me for the brilliant presentation and, almost in passing, included a book on leadership that he thought I might like. We started corresponding via email, and our conversations, initially focused on professional topics, industry, business strategies, books we'd read, flowed with remarkable ease and naturalness, creating a sense of deep and pleasant comfort. Our business meetings over coffee gradually became a pleasant ritual, during which we could discuss not only market trends, but also share views on life. We attended small business forums together, and while these weren't dates in the classic sense, something more was born in these moments, a deep intellectual and emotional connection between two people who found joy in each other's company. One evening, after a particularly business event, Daniel offered to drive me home. We were sitting in his car in front of my house, and the silence filled with a special tension. Turning to me, he said with uncharacteristic seriousness, "Vivian, I need to tell you something." His words were quiet but weighty. "I like you not because you're smart, successful, or independent. Of course you are all those things. But I like you because when I'm with you, it feels like life gains new colors and meaning. It feels worth living to the fullest. Does that make sense?" I looked at him, and in the semi-darkness of the car interior, his face seemed especially open and honest. Not a trace of game playing, no manipulation, only pure, sincere truth coming from the depths of his heart. "Yes," I replied, feeling something tighten in my chest. "It makes sense, and I would like to try to build something with you, too." A smile bloomed on his face, the first truly genuine smile I had seen on him. It transformed all his features, making them softer and warmer. After that memorable night, Daniel and I started officially dating. A few weeks later, he invited me to meet his parents. They lived in a beautiful, cozy house in one of the best neighborhoods of Seattle. When we approached the front door, Daniel's mother opened it, an elegant woman with radiant eyes and a warm, welcoming smile. She first hugged her son, then turned to me. "You must be Vivian," she said, and her voice held genuine warmth. "Daniel has told us so much about you. Please, come in, make yourself at home." His father was waiting for us in the living room. Upon our arrival, he immediately rose from his armchair and, approaching me, extended his hand for a handshake. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Vivian," he said with dignity, and his firm handshake conveyed respect. "We've heard a lot about you." During dinner, they asked me about my work, the family business, my hobbies, and views on life. But it wasn't an interrogation. They truly listened, engaged with my words, and treated me with genuine interest and respect. It was a stark contrast to the humiliating scene that had once played out with Brandon's family. There wasn't a trace of rudeness, no demands, or the feeling that I was being judged and found wanting. After dinner, we all had coffee in the living room, and Daniel suggested organizing a meeting of our families so the parents could get to know each other better. His father and my dad, as it turned out, quickly found common ground. They talked about business, the differences between Denver and Seattle, and spoke with pride and tenderness about us, their children. At one point, Daniel's father turned to my father and said, "Your daughter is truly wonderful. She is smart, driven, and knows exactly what she wants from life. We are incredibly happy that Daniel met her." My father smiled his calm, wise smile in response. "Daniel is a wonderful person. We see and appreciate that." A few weeks later, a photograph from one of the business events appeared in the business community, showing Daniel and me together, surrounded by investors. The picture was strictly professional, nothing personal. But in our poses, in our gazes, one could discern that very connection which left no doubt about the nature of our relationship. Somehow, this news reached Brandon. I don't know by what paths it reached him, but one afternoon, as I was leaving the office building, he suddenly appeared in front of me, as if from underground. He must have been lying in wait for me. "Well, you moved on quickly," he hissed, blocking my path. "Jumped into another man's arms right after me?" "Brandon, there's a restraining order against you," I reminded him coldly, trying to remain calm. "You shouldn't be here." "Were you with him when we were still together?" he demanded, his eyes burning with jealousy mixed with impotent rage. "Is that why you broke up with me?" "I broke up with you because you and your family are terrible people," I retorted, feeling the irritation rise. "Now get out of my way." "You think you're so much better than me?" Brandon took a step towards me, closing the distance, and his face was contorted with a grimace of hatred. Suddenly, a tall, confident figure appeared from behind me. I hadn't even noticed Daniel approach. He appeared as if from nowhere, shielding me with his body. "Step away from her," he said, and his voice, usually soft and engaging, now sounded steely and uncompromising, leaving no room for argument. Brandon gave Daniel a look of obvious distaste. Then his gaze fixed on me again, full of venomous contempt. "Ah, so this is your new boyfriend," he exhaled with a bitter sneer. "Really? Is that it?" "If you take one more step towards her," Daniel continued, without raising his tone, but each word gaining the weight of cold metal, "I promise you will get punched in the face." Brandon froze, his gaze sliding over Daniel's impeccable suit, his straight, confident posture, his face expressing not malice, but firm, indisputable resolve. A moment later, something in his own expression changed. Arrogance and aggression gave way to the realization of his own defeat. He understood that his pathetic attempts at manipulation and intimidation wouldn't work here, that he had met a wall he could not overcome. Without saying another word, he turned sharply and walked away, his shoulders hunched, his gait betraying complete capitulation. I watched him go, and for the first time in many months, an all-consuming, cleansing feeling of relief washed over me. That was the last time Brandon Harris bothered me. A few weeks later, my mother and I went for a leisurely walk along a winding path by Dillon Lake. This place held my brightest childhood memories. I often came here to collect peculiar stones, smooth and cool, at the water's edge. For a while, we walked in a comfortable, thoughtful silence, breathing in the fresh air and enjoying the quiet. Then I broke the silence. "Mom, I used to think I needed someone to love me to feel that my life had meaning." "And now?" my mother asked softly, looking at me with boundless tenderness. "Now I understand that the most important thing is to learn to love yourself," came my quiet but confident reply. "And that is enough." My mother smiled warmly and squeezed my hand in hers, and in that simple gesture was a whole universe of support and understanding. Daniel and I got engaged 6 months into our relationship. We set the wedding for the following spring, dreaming of a celebration under the blooming cherry blossoms. However, just before the significant day, Mrs. Harris, like a poisonous spider, spewed a long, hate-filled, and false post on social media. In it, she painted me as a monster, a heartless deceiver who had used her poor son, played with his feelings, and mercilessly broken his heart without the slightest reason. She skillfully portrayed herself and her family as innocent martyrs, and some people, unfamiliar with the true story, believed this vile farce. I watched as the post spread through the network, as comments condemning me multiplied, as strangers wrote about what a terrible person I must be. I had remained silent for months about what had really happened, but now I realized I could no longer allow the lie to poison the air with impunity. Taking my laptop, I wrote my own post. I told the whole story from the beginning, about how I had mistaken Brandon's petty stinginess for thriftiness, and his silent approval of his family's antics for some mysterious depth. How I had endured humiliation and insults from his relatives, naively believing that after the wedding, everything would magically change. How I had to buy my own engagement ring because Brandon couldn't afford it. I described in detail how his family tried to take the house gifted to me by my parents, how they planned to move in there along with Brandon's brother, without even deigning to ask me. I quoted Mr. Harris's shocking words about how a woman needs to be hit for obedience, and Brandon's nod in response. I reminded everyone of their visit to my office with the ridiculous poster demanding reimbursement for coffee and Uber rides. I described the months of stalking, which ended only thanks to the restraining order, and I concluded my post with a direct address to the Harris family. I will never be your daughter-in-law. I was merely a resource, a house, a wallet to you, someone who could support you, receiving nothing in return but humiliation. I pressed the publish button and slammed the laptop lid shut with relief. Within a few hours, my story spread through social media like wildfire. It was shared, commented on, debated. Brandon's friends, his colleagues, everyone he knew saw it. A week later, I learned from mutual acquaintances that Brandon had been fired from his job. His family's reputation in their small town was irrevocably destroyed. He sent out resumes, but didn't get a single response. I felt no schadenfreude about this. But neither was there a shadow of sadness in me. I simply felt that justice, albeit delayed, had been served. That spring, when the air was filled with the scent of blooming apple trees and the sun caressed the earth with its first truly warm light, Daniel and I got married. The ceremony was the embodiment of everything I had wished for: elegant, filled with genuine joy, and gathering under the vaults of the old stone chapel only the closest of people, our family and devoted friends. Daniel's parents welcomed me with such heartfelt warmth that the last ghosts of uncertainty disappeared. My own parents beamed with happiness, seeing their daughter find true happiness. We moved into the very house gifted to me by my parents, the house that had once been the point of no return in the story with Brandon. Now these walls, which held bitter memories, were to become the beginning of something new, bright, and truly good. Daniel and I decided to perform a symbolic cleansing ritual. Together, we repainted the walls in the master bedroom, forever hiding the stains left by Mrs. Harris. We replaced the charred nightstand, the silent witness to Mr. Harris's insolence, with a new one, chosen together. Slowly but surely, we filled the space with our shared belongings, our photographs, our laughter, transforming the once alien and tainted place into our home. The first year of marriage with Daniel became the living embodiment of the relationship I had always dreamed of. We were partners in the deepest and fullest sense of the word. All decisions, from everyday minutiae to career plans, we made together during long conversations over a cup of evening tea. We unconditionally supported each other's ambitions and aspirations. Daniel never allowed himself the slightest hint of demanding that I perform any female duties. Our domestic life was harmoniously built on the principle of common sense and mutual assistance. We distributed chores depending on workload and skills. If I was late at the office, I would return home to the delightful aromas from the kitchen, where Daniel, having taken off his jacket, would be inspirationally cooking dinner. When he was consumed by urgent projects, I gladly took on all the household chores. His parents, who visited us several times, were always models of kindness and respect. They treated me not as a wallet or potential servant, but as their own daughter, whose opinions and feelings were of paramount importance. My parents adored Daniel. My father started regularly inviting him to his traditional Saturday golf game, and my mother could casually call him to discuss a new book or just chat about nothing. He wove himself organically and naturally into the fabric of our family, something that had never happened with Brandon. My career was also on the rise. After that memorable conference presentation, I received several tempting offers from other companies. But I remained loyal to the family business. Working with my parents brought me deep satisfaction. I was promoted to vice president, and I enthusiastically set about helping to expand the business into new promising markets. Daniel's company was also experiencing a period of active growth. Our evening conversations often turned into brainstorming sessions where we exchanged ideas, and I infinitely valued the attention and respect with which he treated my opinion. About a year after the wedding, I accidentally ran into an acquaintance who knew Brandon. From her words, it turned out that he had eventually returned to West Virginia and was living with his parents. After my story went viral, he could no longer find work in Denver. His reputation was hopelessly ruined. Hearing this, I felt no schadenfreude nor satisfaction, but not a drop of pity arose in me either. He had made his choice. He had stalked me, tried to publicly humiliate me, threatened me. The consequences were the logical and direct result of his own actions. The same woman reported that Brandon's brother Jacob had gotten divorced. His wife Ashley, tired of the endless Harris family drama, had simply left. I was not surprised. At times, my memory returned to that fateful day in the house. I would see Mrs. Harris again, sprawled on the bed in her dirty shoes. I remembered Mr. Harris stubbing out his cigarette on the polished wooden surface without a trace of embarrassment. I felt the icy grip of Brandon's fingers on my wrist the moment I tried to stand up for myself. And now, looking back, I felt only one thing: gratitude. Gratitude to fate for allowing me to see their true faces before I tied my life to them. Gratitude to my father, whose fist became an act not of violence, but of protection and justice. Gratitude to myself for having the courage to call off the wedding. The realization of what could have been sent a soul-chilling horror through me. I would have been locked in a marriage with a man who believed women needed to be hit for obedience, forced to support his family, paying for everything, while enduring treatment like dirt. Instead, I found my happiness next to Daniel, a man who saw in me not an appendage to his status or a means to an end, but an equal partner, whose opinion was of paramount importance to him, whose independence he not only respected but actively encouraged, and whose family, which was no less important, accepted me without a shadow of doubt, with sincere, wide-open arms, becoming my reliable support and backbone. 2 years after our wedding, on one serene Saturday morning, as sunbeams played in the glasses of orange juice, Daniel, putting aside the newspaper, said with a thoughtful look, "I've been thinking about something lately." "And what's that?" I asked, watching him with curiosity. "I want to start a charitable foundation," he said, and his eyes lit up with that fire which appeared when he spoke about truly important things. "To help young women starting their journey in business, organize mentorship programs for them, establish scholarships, create networking platforms. What do you think of this idea?" "I think it's a brilliant idea," I replied without the slightest hesitation, feeling something long familiar and close resonate within me. And I would be delighted to take part in it. The subsequent few months were filled with bustling activity. We immersed ourselves in strategic planning, negotiated with other company executives, attracted funding, and enthusiastically developed the structure of future programs. The foundation officially launched 6 months later, and I joined its board of directors, finding in this work not only a new professional challenge, but also a deep personal meaning. Thanks to the foundation, I had the fortune to meet dozens of bright, ambitious, and hard-working young women in whose eyes I excitedly recognized myself, the one who had once also been timid, doubtful, but desperately wanted to succeed. I became a mentor to several of them, sharing my experience and trying to help them avoid the mistakes I had once made myself. One day, one of my mentees, shyly lowering her eyes, asked me, "How did you know your husband was the one?" I thought for a moment, gathering into a single picture thousands of big and small moments from our life together. "He never tried to belittle me or make me dependent on him," I began slowly. "He never demanded that I sacrifice my career or my independence. He never looked at me as a resource to be used. From the very beginning, he saw in me a person with whom he wanted to build a shared, full life." The girl nodded attentively, taking notes in her notebook. "And his family," I continued, "treated me with unwavering respect from day one. They demanded nothing from me, didn't insult me, didn't try to control me, and believe me, that is just as important as the person you marry." 3 years after the wedding, Daniel and I realized another shared dream. We bought a cozy vacation home in a picturesque area near the mountains, where we escaped on weekends to ski in the winter and go on long hiking trips in the summer. This place became our quiet refuge from the hectic pace of city life. My parents were gradually aging, and more responsibility for the family business was falling on my shoulders. But Daniel always remained my main support during periods of stress and endless work hours. He never complained when I had to cancel our plans or bring work home, but simply was there, his presence making it clear that we were one team. From time to time, I still remembered Brandon, but with each passing year, these thoughts visited me less and less often, until he finally turned into a blurred image from the past, a harsh but necessary lesson life had taught me. I learned not to ignore the warning signs my intuition sends. I understood that love alone, even the most passionate, is not enough for happiness if it is not based on the deepest, unshakable respect. I realized the huge role played by the family you marry into. But most importantly, I learned to truly value myself, to know my own worth, and to never again settle for less than I deserve. That very house, gifted to me by my parents, the house that became the apple of discord in my relationship with Brandon and his family, gradually transformed and became for me a bright symbol of all the brightest and kindest things in my life. It was within its walls that Daniel and I built our shared nest. Here we hosted friends for long dinner parties. Here we made plans for the future, filling every room with laughter and love. Sometimes I would enter the master bedroom, and my memory involuntarily resurrected images of that long-ago day. Mrs. Harris reclining on the bed in her dirty shoes and her arrogant, haughty face. And now, years later, I would just smile quietly, with serene certainty, knowing that she never got what she so craved. This house was mine. My marriage was mine. My life belonged entirely to me, and I had never felt so completely and utterly happy.